Trump last night was discussing his efforts to take back control of the Panama Canal. And here's what he said about that.
Secretary of State Rubio is in Panama right now, and we're talking about the Panama Canal. What they've done is terrible. They violated the agreement. They're not allowed to violate the agreement. China's running the Panama Canal. That was not given to China. That was given to Panama foolishly. But they violated the agreement, and we're going to take it back, or something very powerful is going to happen.
Okay, so he appears to threaten to use force to take back the canal. At least that's how it's being interpreted by a lot of people. Or maybe he's indicating that taking it back forcefully is an option. So it's not exactly a threat. He's not saying, well, give us back the Panama Canal. We're going to send troops into Panama. And I don't think that's. I don't see that scenario as plausible. But he says, like, we got to work this out, or something very powerful is going to happen. So you kind of interpret it the way you want. But there is a clear ultimatum there, right? And he's right. He's right on this too, that yes, we should take back control of the Panama Canal one way or another. That canal is ours. We should control it. And Trump is right that China right now exerts a lot of influence over the canal. So there is some real urgency here. And as I alluded to before, Panama, there already are results on this. It's not settled completely, but Panama has, Rubio, new Secretary of State, went down to Panama, and it was his first international trip as Secretary of State. And already, Panama has agreed to end a deal with China that had been on the table. So this is being handled diplomatically. Hopefully it is all worked out diplomatically. It seems to be trending that way. That obviously is vastly preferable. But one way or another, the United States should control the Panama Canal, and because that canal is ours. And just some basic facts about this, if you're not familiar with it or with the history of it. First of all, the vast majority of the ships that go through the canal are coming to or leaving ports in the United States. So it's about 70% of the traffic is going to the United States or coming from the United States. More importantly, we built the canal. Okay, the United States spent 10 years building the canal at the beginning of the 20th century. Thousands of Americans died in the process. Now, I think the official estimates are like 5,000, 6,000 Americans. It was probably way more than that. But thousands of Americans died building the canal. It's one of the greatest construction projects ever undertaken in human history. One of the greatest engineering marvels in the history of humanity. I mean, they cut a hole in the earth from one ocean to another. It's like inconceivable how they did it. I've read a couple of books now on the Panama Canal, and even after reading the books, in fact, even more so after reading the books and learning about the process, you can't wrap your mind around it. How is that possible? Just imagine that. Like, imagine. It's one thing when if you go to the Panama Canal, which I never have been, and you look at it when it's already constructed. But imagine standing on that plot of land before anything was constructed, when it was just a jungle, because that's what it was, and like trying to conceptualize how we're going to dig a giant hole that goes from this ocean all the way to the next one across. We're gonna split these two continents in two, and that's what America did. And this country built it and paid for it. This was American grit and ingenuity, and we paid for it with American treasure and American blood. So why in the hell should anyone but America have control over it? Why should Panama have control over it? Panama didn't build it. Panama didn't build it. They didn't pay for it. And they're not even the ones who are mostly using it. America built it, paid for it, and 70% of the time we're the ones using it. No other country was able to build it. The French tried to build it and failed. And we did it. We built it. And then about 60 years later, Jimmy Carter, the incompetent buffoon that he was, gave the canal away. He just gave it away. It is one of the most one-sided deals in history. And yet, this idiot, and to call Jimmy Carter a buffoon or an idiot, I think is probably cutting him too much slack, because he was also just a bad guy. He was a bad leader and a bad man. And by the way, I know that he lived for a long time afterwards, but that doesn't all of a sudden change the fact that he was a bad leader and a bad person. And he did a lot of terrible things, and he caused this man did immeasurable damage to the country. But then he lived till he was 100, and so all of a sudden it doesn't count anymore. Because for people in my generation or younger, we only remember Jimmy Carter as this kind of frail old man just kind of sitting there all shriveled up. And so because of that, he sort of like bought goodwill because he was just really old for a long time. But that doesn't change the fact that he was a terrible, terrible president and made the world a worse place. And this is not the only bad thing he did, but it's one of the worst. And he considered it to be his crowning achievement. One of his crowning achievements, he thought, was this deal of giving away the Panama Canal. Which, how is that an achievement? You gave someone, you gave a thing of immense value to another country, and they gave you nothing in return, and that's an achievement? That's like if I considered it an achievement because I worked out a deal with you where I would give you $1 million and you give me nothing. Maybe not nothing. Maybe I bought a toothpick from you for $1 million. And then for the rest of my life, I brag that I just made this incredible deal. I convinced you to give me a toothpick for just $1 million. What a deal-making genius I am. Except it's worse than that, because at least if I gave you $1 million, I earned the million. I can spend it how I want. It's my million. But in the case of the Panama Canal, Jimmy Carter didn't build it. It never would have been built under his leadership because he was a weak, feckless, corrupt leader who couldn't do anything. No, he didn't build it. Instead, he took a massive dump all over the Americans who struggled and died for years to build it and decided to just give it away. Now, the real reason that it was given away was just a sense of white guilt. Really, that's what it was. It was just this sacrifice on the altar of white guilt, because America's a predominantly white country, even more so back when Jimmy Carter was in office, and so it was like we have no right to it, and so that's really what it was. But beyond that, ostensibly, the reason that it was done was to improve relations with Latin America. That's the reason that was given. And the problem is that, first of all, we're in a position of power. So we don't need to give them this gift that costs billions of dollars and thousands of lives just to improve relations. We don't need to bribe them. Okay, we don't have to bribe Panama to make them like us. Who gives a if they like us or not? If you don't give it to us, we're going to not like you, okay? Then don't. What do we care? What possible difference does it make what you think of us? But also, how did that work out, Jimmy? How did it work out, giving the Panama Canal to improve relations with Latin America? How did that pan out? Well, I'll tell you how it panned out. Latin America has spent the following 40 years shipping drugs and criminals into our country, utterly decimating our national sovereignty while killing thousands of more Americans. So that's what they gave us. I said that they gave us nothing in exchange for the Panama Canal. I'm wrong. That's what they gave us. So as this great token of good faith to Latin America, we gave them the Panama Canal, and in exchange, they gave us crime and drugs for 40 years. That's the improved relations with Latin America, is that. So So now Trump wants the Panama Canal back, and I hope he gets it. And look, I know that the response is going to be, well, it was a treaty. It's a legal agreement. There's nothing you could do. First of all, Panama has almost certainly violated the terms of the treaty. It would not be that hard to take a look at it and find myriad ways that they violated the treaty, which would justify us saying treaty's been violated. It is now defunct. You violated it. I mean, one of the aspects of the treaty was neutrality, that the canal is supposed to remain neutral, and yet you've got China down there exerting an outsized influence, extending their tentacles from the other side of the globe. So that alone, we'd be perfectly justified in saying you violated the treaty. That's really the answer to the whole thing about the treaty. But then also, look, I mean, Jimmy Carter had no right to give it away. Are we beholden forever to this terrible, awful deal that is like, that hurts America? So how long? I mean, 1,000 years from now, we still, it never changes? Even though Panama is this tiny little speck of a country with no power at all. And I mean, we could just show up and say we're taking the canal back. You can do literally nothing about it. We could do that. But you got to respect the treaty. All right, fine. Well, that's the thing about contracts is like if you get some lawyers in a room, they're very good at this, and they can figure out ways that the contract was violated. They can figure out, like I said, they can figure out 1,000 ways. And so have them do that. I'm sure they already have. Here's 1,000 ways Panama violated the treaty, so we're taking the canal back. We could do it legally if it makes everyone feel more comfortable with it. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.